let's now look at the replication hierarchy. So this is going to show us what our database structure is, but it's going to show us in an outline format where the children are indented with respect to the parent. But this is also where we can create we can actually publish a publication. So to do that, there's a wizard, and so you just click the action, new publication, schedule wizard. And so we're going to create a schedule for sending data to child databases versus receiving data from child databases. We're going to say next. And if we had any unscheduled publications, they would appear here. We don't, so we won't worry about it. And then you can say child databases will either subscribe automatically or will have to be added manually. So I would recommend that you use subscribe automatically, because that then means that any new stores that you create will automatically subscribe to those publications. So like that standard data one where it's going to run like once a day. If you choose have to be added manually, then that means that if you add a new store, it's not going to automatically get all that data every day unless you go and manually subscribe it. And so you don't want to have to remember to do all that. So just using the first option is generally better unless you have a good reason not to. And that's it. So so you can just run through that wizard to publish your publications. And so if we now, and what it's actually creating is a schedule record. So with that wizard, just all it does is it creates this schedule card where the action type is set to publication. We also have subscription and some other action types here, which we don't really need to know about. And then we're saying we are publishing from head office and which set of, which publication we're actually sending out and what the description is. But then what the wizard doesn't do is any of the actual scheduling. So it just creates the card for you, but then you can go in and then make some decisions about when it runs, how often it runs, etc. So you're going to indicate what date you want it to actually start. So, if you want it to start, pretty much immediately, you could use yesterday's date with whatever time. Or if you wanted it to sort of set it up to occur in the future, you could then use whatever future date you wanted. The interval is how often it's actually going to execute this publication, and then you can make it active or not active. And so then you can choose days of the week that it'll run as well. So for example, if the head office is closed on weekends, there's no real need to send out all of that data on Saturdays and Sundays. So you can uncheck Saturday and Sunday if it doesn't need to be sent, and it'll just, if anything does happen, it'll get caught up on Monday. So that's how you sort of initiate the process of pushing data out. One thing to note is that what you're going to want to do to set up a new store is actually set it all up in the head office. So in general, all the setups are going to be done in the head office. And so for store one, we set it up in the head office, and then we can use this create setup disk button. And create setup disk is going to allow you to create one of those export files that you can then, email to yourself or put on a thumb drive or whatever. And then when you're actually setting up the store database, before you set anything else up, you log in and don't do any setups, but then just come to this database profile screen and go to load setup disk and point it at that file, and it'll set all the replication stuff up for you, and you can then start it replicating. And so you then don't need to set up the store information inside the store database itself. It'll just get replicated down from the head office because that file is database specific and it knows what database it's supposed to be, basically. So once you load that file, the replication setup card will get set to the correct database in that remote system. So when you're setting up new stores, it makes it really easy to just use those setup disks to make that happen.
Okay.
So then to actually kick off the replication, it actually runs as a NAS. So if we now go back to my nav server and look at my administration console, if we look at the NAS services, a couple of things are important here. One is that you need to set the service's default company. So that's blank by default, but if you don't set it, then NAS doesn't know what company to log into. So a NAS can only be running in one company at a time, and you have to tell it which company by using the service's default company setting. And then the other is that you're going to go to NAS services and you're going to put in code unit 102.1102. That's the replication management code unit. And so for each of the databases that are going to be involved in replication, whether it's head office or one of the stores, its service tier has to have a NAS running. So of course it can be a separate service tier that you're using just for NAS, which wouldn't be a bad idea anyway, rather than using the one that clients log into. But make sure you set the service's default company and that you set the startup code unit on the NAS to 102.1102. So I'm going to now, I'm going to restart my nav service process, and then I'm going to open the event log and show you what it looks like, just so you can see what to look for to make sure that everything is working properly. So actually I'll do it in the store database. So say restart. Look at the event viewer. And the application event log. We should see service shutting down. So here's it restarting. And okay, starting back up. Registered in Active Directory, and there's the web service address. It's listening. I'm going to refresh, see if there are new messages. And so then we start getting messages from the retail system saying that the replication started, that the schedule has started. So I have my logging set on high, so you can see literally every step that it's taking. So it's telling us that a broadcast is scheduled, that it processed the broadcast, it took 2 seconds, priority data is processed, that we're sending orders is processed. So, it's going to keep putting messages that priority B is processed. It'll keep putting messages in the application event log. So when you're setting this up, it's a really good tool to use. So to turn that logging level to high, at least at first, it's just so that you can make sure that when you start up your NAS that it is actually doing something. You should see tons and tons of messages coming from Dynamic Retail when you restart your nav service after you set up the NAS setting to run that code unit ID. Okay?
Yep.
All right. So
about the publication, I think that those tables you show me is like a must-have table, right?
Yes.
The publication. So
right.
you have a tool to kind of like a preset tool to when you configure that I can just import it.
Correct.
Yeah. So I don't have to recreate them.
You don't, yeah. So it's yeah. So we have those files that you can import, and it'll create all those publications for you.
Oh, okay.
So one thing also is on the replication structure list, if you look at the fact boxes on the side, it'll show you what publications are being published by a database and which ones it's subscribing to. So my store is subscribing to the head office standard publication, and my head office is publishing that standard publication and isn't subscribing to anything. So that's another good way to see, to make sure that your publication is actually successfully published, is just to look at these fact boxes on the side here and make sure that what you think is actually publishing is publishing and what you think is actually subscribing is subscribing.
Mm-hmm. Okay.